It had taken almost all my strength to drag myself out of bed and go down to the beach. By that time, it was noon. A strip of yellow tape trailed around the length of the coastline. Police cars were parked up near the pier, with a few standing policemen herding away a gathering crowd of curious tourists. According to the local grapevine, the body of a vagrant had been found on the beach and the investigation was still ongoing. Only I knew who the vagrant was and what had really happened to him. What could I tell the police? I could still hear the creature shrieking in the back of my head and feel its presence, even when it was nowhere in sight. It was watching, waiting. But for what? Its appearance hadn't been the most terrifying part of the whole encounter. Its words were lodged in my mind like a broken record. Whatever it was, it knew me. It knew where she was. She sleeps down in the darkness. The more I thought about it, the more the knot in my chest tightened. It had torn through my father like a paper doll. I knew that it was more than capable of killing those who got in its way. Yet it didn't hurt me. Maybe it was just toying with its fresh prey, waiting for the right moment to strike. But somehow, I knew otherwise. I knew that I had to check on Laurie. She too would come to know about our father's death, and I knew that it would pile on top of the guilt of Mom's disappearance until it would threaten to collapse the fragile house of cards that was her being. When I had returned to our hotel room and slid the card through the key, the door had opened to dead silence. My heart descended. "Laurie?" I called out. "Please, God, no, not her." I rushed in, only to find her hunched over on the chair. My relief at seeing her, however, was short-lived when I noticed the glow of my phone gripped in her hand as she scrolled through it, trying to unlock it. She finally noticed my presence, her long, greasy hair falling backwards to reveal an accusatory stare, one that rooted me to the ground the same way the creature had done. "I saw you with him. With Dad." Laurie, her eyes flashed. "Did you really think I was stupid? You were talking to him. Now, a body turns up on the beach. He's gone now, and so is Mom. You're my brother, but I don't know what to believe anymore." She chewed back a sob and returned her unblinking gaze to me, her whole body shaking, threatening to burst with the tidal wave of emotion she was holding back. "No more lies or running," she swallowed. "I want to know what the fuck is going on." My stomach churned at the idea that in her mind, I was somehow responsible for what had happened to our parents. At the same time, it just made too much sense. I knew that I had to tell her. I'd hidden it from her for too long. I didn't care if she didn't believe me, she just had to know. "All right, Laura. I'll tell you everything." I took my phone out of her trembling hands and accessed the album, scrolling down to the dreaded picture before pushing my phone out towards her. Showing my sister that last picture that I took of our mother was one of the hardest moments of my life. Everything came out at that moment. She stared at her blankly for a few minutes before she finally saw it. She fell backwards in her seat, clasping her hand to her mouth, eyes watery and wide with that same animal terror. "Oh, God. What is that?" I hung my head. "Yeah. It's real. It's out there, Laurie. It has her. I don't know why or how, but it's like it's drawn to her." She looked at me, her mouth open. Her brain seemed to be working furiously to process the information, hands gripping the armrest of the chair to keep her from completely falling out of it. I could see suspicion and confusion tweaking her face as she glanced upward from the phone to me as I stood there. I waited in tepid silence for her to scream at me for playing such a twisted joke at a time like this and to call the police. "I'm sorry. I should have hidden this from you. I messed up." "Don't." She got onto her shaky legs. An equal mixture of dread and anticipation swirled in me for what would come next. Her skin was marble pale, enough to make me feel that I was looking at a statue instead of a person, but the ragged emotion in her eyes was unmistakable. Since that night, I've always felt like something's watching us. I thought I was going crazy. God, I never thought, never imagined. My chest sagged in relief. She felt it too. She collapsed into my arms, soaking the lapel of my jacket with long pent-up tears. My own burned my eyes, too tired to blink them back. In that moment I held her as I would never let her go. It was a gesture of silent solidarity, that she wasn't going insane from grief. I stumbled over my words, searching for ones of comfort, but none seemed to come, only the harsh truth. "Laurie, I don't know what to do. It already has her. I don't know if we can get her back." My hands tightened around her back to the point I could feel the jutting outline of her ribs. "I don't know. Maybe we can." Her voice was so quiet that I was prepared to pass it off as a figment of my own desperate imagination. Looking down, I saw a flash of dormant inspiration through her eyes, of the old Laurie returning. "Maybe we can go out there. You said that whatever it was drawn to her, right? Well, all we need is a little piece of her. I blinked, before staring down at her. What? I breathed out. Her face was completely serious, mouth straightened in a determined frown. We bring it to us. It was our mother's wedding ring, tucked away inside her suitcase, which Lori had selected as the lure, in her own words. As I had laid it down in the center of the floor, my fingers had held it longer than it was necessary, to the point Lori had to come along and gently pry it out of my hands. Come on. Just think about her. She sighed. I wanted to believe that it would work. Even with everything that had happened, it seemed surreal. By now, I knew we were out of options and patience. Life had become surreal enough for us. Whatever we were up against, it didn't operate by the rules of any logical world. It was worth a shot. The moon was high when we set up our ritualistic set, radiating off the black tides outside. It looked almost exactly as it did on the night where we had heard those inhuman sounds on the beach. A buoy toiled through the distant mists as the sea air wafted through the half-open window. I scattered a handful of sand I had managed to scoop up from the beach. Inside, every fiber of me was begging this to work. If only to see her face again and know she was alright, as impossible it was. We stood there for a few minutes, waiting for something to happen. As we were about to call it off, the lights of the room blinkered out and we found ourselves plunged into darkness. My hand found my sister's, giving it a comforting squeeze. Cold fear latched along the base of my spine as a low, crackling growl resounded out from the darkness, followed by the pacing scrape of wet feet. The only other sound that permeated through the silence was the sound of our own rapid breaths. It was here. Only this time, I wasn't afraid of it. I wanted the truth. I took a step forward. Where is she? I demanded. Those eyes glinted out at me from the corner of the room, hovering like twin spotlights, never wavering from either of us, claws crinkling against the wallpaper of the room. Before another word could leave me, it did something that would haunt me. It narrowed its glowing eyes and a sickening smile stretched across its face, teeth glimmering like knives in the faint light. Listening closer, I heard what sounded like a pair of smaller feet following in its gait. A smaller pair of reflective eyes shone out from behind its larger ones. It wasn't alone this time. Lori pushed past me, uncaring of the danger. I could feel the rage radiating off her body. Where the hell is she? Lori? The air seemed to be sucked out of the room itself with the interjection of the sudden voice. The anger was wiped off Lori's face in a second, her ashen face framed against the dark, mirroring my own shocked expression. The smaller figure edged past the creature, pushing forward into the light. My lower lip began to quake, the air pushed out of my lungs as if I'd been punched in the stomach. Mom. She was still dressed in the exact same clothes she'd been wearing the night she went on the walk, the turtleneck sweater and the long flowing lilac skirt, that made her look like a kindergarten teacher, sans footwear. Without even thinking, I ran forward and threw my arms around her. I almost wept when I felt the solidity of her body, that she wasn't a hallucination. After a few moments of stunned silence, Lori followed too. She was here, alive. Oh my God, Mom, it's you, it's really you. Her hand curled around my head, brushing through my hair like she'd done to comfort me as a child whenever I'd been upset. I'm glad to see you too. I missed you both so much. She whispered. Her smile receded as she glanced over her shoulder at the massive presence that lurked behind her into an expression I can only struggle to describe. Sadness. Regret. I can't be here long, she admitted. Can't be here? Mom, what are you talking about? Her eyes misted up, drifting in the direction of the open window. The corners of her downturned mouth twitched upwards. You know, when I was a little girl, I used to have an imaginary friend, a boy who lived out in the sea. I'd go to the beach at night and talk to him and he would sing to me. Beautiful songs, the kind no one ever had ever heard. My family never believed me whenever I told them. When I grew up and left this place, I forgot about him. She saw her wedding ring glinting out from the middle of the floor underneath the pile of sand and eyes shuddered. Her fingers traced over the space on her ring finger. But he never forgot about me. Lori edged closer to her, her voice dropping to a whisper. Mom, we can get away from all this. Go back to the city, forget this ever happened. Her face crumpled, hands pulling at Mom's sleeves as she fell forward, her body juddering with sobs. Please, Mommy. Please, just come home. It wasn't Lori's normal, assured voice I heard, but that of a broken, scared little girl. It was probably the most vulnerable I'd ever seen her in our entire lives. Mom looked close to tears herself as she embraced Lori, murmuring soft consolations into her ear. "I'm sorry, honey. I can't." She stood up, peeling down the collar of her mint turtleneck sweater. 3 vertical slits trailed down both sides of her neck, darkened with dried blood from where the skin had split open. Even in the faint light, I swore I saw them pulsating, as if they were living entities of their own. "Gills." She gave a humorless smile as she concealed them behind her hand, all too aware of our horrified expressions. "Don't worry about me. I'm fine. He would never hurt me. He's done so much for me. He gave me love." She pulled us to her with both arms and a strength I never expected from someone of her stature. I felt my rib cage fold in her crushing touch, a low sob blowing into my ear. "He gave me you." As soon as I heard it, the words were seared into my mind. She cupped my face, trying to look reassuring. I felt the scales that were already forming on her palm scrape my skin. "You and your sister," she went on, voice shaking, "were a gift. You were the best things that ever happened to me, and I am so honored that I could be your mother. You both turned out amazing. I'm so sorry. I know that I should have told you the truth a long time ago." A clawed, wet hand extended from the darkness, clenching around her shoulder. She took a step back into the shadows where it stood behind her. "I love you. I love you both so much. I always will. You'll always be my babies no matter how old you are." We could only watch as she slowly faded out of our vision, helpless to stop it. "Mom, please, no. Don't you worry about me anymore. I'm happy now. Promise me that you'll take care of each other." She gave one final, sweet smile before being swallowed up forever into the dusk. I couldn't take it. I rushed forward to the direction of the door, groping in the direction of the light switch. I had to stop it. We couldn't lose her again. A brief hope jolted through me as I felt the familiar outline. Light burst back into the room. It took a good while for my eyes to adjust to the blinding whiteness after what felt like an eternity of darkness. But both our mother and the creature were gone, as if the light itself had banished them from existence itself. Lori's hand was still frozen in the air, reaching toward the space where our mother had once stood. When she finally realized that we had lost her forever, she fell to her knees with a strangled sob. My sister and I sat together, sobbing until the dawn had peeked in through the curtains. We left that same morning, before the police could ask us any more questions despite the lack of sleep. We didn't stop driving until the peaks of the city had winded into our view. We arrived home 2 days ago and it hasn't felt the same since. Mom's memory seems to haunt every room. Everything from the smiling photos that hung across the walls to the untouched bottles of perfume stacked across her dresser is a permanent reminder now. Regardless, Lori and I try to keep her alive, try to remember all the good she did for us and try to give it to others we encounter. Even with the grief, neither of us could try to deny the deep, all-encompassing release that followed. Wherever she was, our mother was loved and safe. She wasn't suffering anymore. It didn't stop us from missing her any less. Since we came back, I haven't been able to settle into the city like I used to. The bright lights that used to enthrall me only irritate and the smog chokes my lungs. I can barely take a step outside anymore. Once I lived for it, now I can barely stand it. The memory of the sea always pulls me back. I wanted to feel the cold breeze on my face, for the salt to make my eyes water. I wanted to plunge off a cliff into the darkest depths of the sea, braving the smooth friction of the sea foam to go down, never to submerge. As the days pass, I feel less grief for the man I thought was my father, and the urge to return to the water grows stronger. The murmur in the back of my head had pitched into a scream that echoes without stopping inside my head. My own sense of reason has been scrambled into white noise, blocked out by instinct. I know that I'm changing. It's happening, day by day. I know that I should be afraid. I can already feel the skin on my cheek hardening into scaly platelets, where its tongue had slit up. But I'm not. I've been holding out for as long as I can, trying to stay there for my sister. She's already lost too many people in her life. But it's almost unavoidable now. I want to be with her, with my family. I know she's out there, waiting. I'm no longer afraid of what lies beneath. If I vanish too, then at least you'll know where I am.